Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with Rice-Ah-Roni. That's right, I am very excited to show you my take on the dish created by and for people that can't quite decide whether they want rice or pasta. And before we get started, I just have to say, I've lived in San Francisco for over 30 years, and the next time I have this served to me in town will be the first time. So I'm not exactly sure where that famous tagline came from. But be that as it may, this is still quite a delicious side dish, and as you'll see, very easy to make. So with that, let's go ahead and get started with our top secret spice blend, which will include some salt, some freshly ground black pepper, some celery salt, paprika, coriander, turmeric, some dried mustard, and last but never least, some cayenne pepper. And sure, we could have added those one at a time to the pan, but when we have this many to add, I always think it's easier to do ahead of time. And then just toss in at once. And then once that's set, we'll head over to the stove, where we're going to melt 2 or 3 tablespoons of butter over medium-high heat in a pan that's at least 3 or 4 inches deep and has a tight-fitting lid. That's kind of important here. And then once that butter starts to melt and bubble, we'll go ahead and add our diced onion. But we're not going to saute that alone this time, because to that we're going to add our pasta. And what I like to use is orzo, also known as melon seed pasta, which I think looks cool and works very nicely in this. But if you wanted to break up some spaghetti into small pieces, that would also work, and is probably the more popular choice. And what we want to do for the next few minutes is cook this mixture stirring until our onions soften and turn translucent. But much more importantly, our pieces of pasta toast to a beautiful golden brown. And by the way, all those little pieces of pasta are not going to cook at the same rate. Okay, so some are going to get a little darker than others, but that's all part of the show. And I'll pretty much keep this on medium-high, but if you want, you could back it down to medium, which is going to take a little longer, but might be a little safer. So adjust if need be. That's just you cooking. And then what we'll do once we've determined our pasta's cooked to the perfect golden brown, which for me was right here, we'll go ahead and toss in our top secret spice blend and stir that in and cook that for, about 30 seconds or so, just to sort of wake up those flavors in that hot fat. And then once we've stirred in our spices and cooked that for about a half a minute, we can go ahead and add our white long grain rice and stir that in. In the rice, we're not going to brown. We are only going to stir that around long enough where we think all those grains of rice are coated with the butter, which is only going to take about a minute or so. Just be careful, the rice does like to fly out of the pan. Yes, I did edit that part out. But anyway, we'll go ahead and stir in our rice. And once we're pretty confident it's been coated with all that goodness, we'll go ahead and add our chicken broth. And you know how sometimes I tell you can use water instead? This time you can't. Okay, you really do want to use a nice rich stock or broth for this. We did that video. And we're actually going to put in less than one would assume. Okay, a 2-to-1 ratio is fairly standard, but in my opinion, way too much liquid. Okay, that's when things get mushy and sticky. So we're going with a 1 to 1.5 ratio, which I think works out way better. But anyway, we'll stir that in and wait for it to come up to a simmer, at which point we'll give it one last stir before reducing our heat to low, covering it, and letting it cook covered for exactly 17 minutes. Okay, no stirring, no peeking, which is why these glass lids are cool. You can peek anytime you want without screwing it up. And what we'll do once our timer rings after exactly 17 minutes is turn off the heat and let it sit just like that for exactly 5 minutes. Okay, don't touch the lid, just let it sit there. And then what we'll do once our timer rings after 5 minutes is take off the lid, add some finely and freshly chopped Italian parsley, and then fluff it with a fork. Okay, we want to fluff this and fluff it good. And what we're doing here is releasing a lot of that residual heat so it doesn't overcook. But we're also at the same time breaking up any clumps, so all our grains of rice and pasta are nicely separated. And while I'm doing this, I should mention, if you want, you can add other stuff to this. Okay, things like green peas or diced vegetables, shredded chicken, garbanzo beans. So accessorize this as you see fit. You are, after all, the Carlo Medioni of your Rice-Ah-Roni. And then once our mixture has been thoroughly forked and fluffed, it is pretty much ready to eat. Except, of course, for the traditional taste. Right, you may need to adjust with more salt. A lot of that's going to depend on how highly seasoned your broth was. But mine was perfect, so I went ahead and served it up. And then there are some side dishes you want to transfer into some kind of beautiful serving dish. And then there's others like this that you just want to serve right out of the pan. It just seems more appropriate. And I finished up with a little pinch of parsley I noticed on the cutting board. And that's it. What I'm calling Rice-Ah-Roni is done. Take that, trademark infringement lawyers. I'm still probably going to get a letter. But it will all have been worth it. Because this really is delicious and remarkably close to that stuff they call the San Francisco treat. And if you're wondering, is it really that tasty? Well, not quite, but there's 3 good reasons for that. M, S, and G, which this does not contain. But having said that, I really love how this comes out. And there's something to be said for being able to pronounce all the ingredients in it. And this is really not that much harder to make than the stuff from the store. But anyway, that's it, what I'm calling Rice-Ah-Roni. If you'll excuse me, I'm going to go hang out waiting for my cease and desist letter. But in the meantime, I really do hope you give this a try soon. So head over to foodwishes.com for all the ingredient amounts and more info as usual. And as always, enjoy.